Andy, go
I'm,
ahead.
I'm taking it. I think we're live.
Take it.
Welcome to
Take it.
OZ NewsHour. I'm Andy Hagans here with Jimmy Atkinson. Today is August 26th, 2024, and we are covering the most important stories in the wide world of opportunity zones.
We're talking about opportunity zones. We're talking about opportunity zones.
I like the prop, Jimmy. You know, normally this is the part of the show where we do a little bit of small talk. I think I might skip the small talk today. No offense. You know, but we have so much to cover. I'm just going to dive right in because this is like the most OZ news headlines I think we've ever had in the history of the show.
It's been a busy month. Go ahead, Andy.
It has. So let's start with the newspaper of record, at least according to some people, the New York Times. Jimmy, they covered opportunity zones. It kept popping up, you know, at the convention, in the debate. And now the New York Times felt like they needed to cover it, which I'll take any coverage, even if it's negative, just to spread awareness of OZs. How do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, I'm with you. I'm excited that OZs are back in the mainstream media. I grabbed the newspaper around the house that I had from a while ago. So this isn't the actual New York Times, but I don't subscribe to the print issue. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. Opportunity zones are back in the national media here this past couple of weeks.
And let me ask you this, Jimmy. In your view, was this a fair story? Was the New York Times covering this in a factual, objective manner, you know, as journalists, or do you think there was an agenda or a slant, or were they trying to make a particular point with this coverage?
I'm going to try to be magnanimous about this, Andy. I think they covered it as balanced and as fairly as they possibly could, which is a little bit of a dig at them, but also I am kind of giving them their due. They did seek out opinions from several opportunity zone champions, including Alex Floxbart, including Novogradec, including the Economic Innovation Group, among others. So I appreciated that. It was rather balanced. I thought they did nitpick the program a little bit in the article. They attacked it mainly for not doing enough for lower income residents and for only spurring economic development in some census tracts, but not the really, really impoverished census tracts, which is true. But on the whole, for a national program like this, I think opportunity zones have been hugely successful. Yes, it is a tax break for wealthy investors. That's what creates the incentive for this capital to pour into these lower income communities. It's not a one size fits all that's going to work perfectly for all of our nation's ills, but it is doing some positive good. I thought the New York Times was a little bit nitpicky, but overall, I think they covered it. They did a more balanced job of covering it than I had expected. I do think that the headline comes across as more negative than the actual article is.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jimmy. And I think the headline almost, that, you know, given that it's the New York Times, given their slant, given their audience, any headline with the word Trump in it can't be too positive, right? But to your point, anytime this program is covered by national media, especially national media with a pretty well-known progressive or liberal slant, a balanced article that, you know, that refers and references and interviews some of the folks in the opportunity zones industry, I think that's really about as good as you can hope for, right?
I think so. And I'll just read the headline in case we have anybody listening to the audio version on Apple Podcasts or Spotify after this live episode. The headline is Trump cites opportunity zones as a triumph. Their success is middling. And then the subheadline, a tax incentive with bipartisan roots aims to foster development in poor areas. It has fueled building, but it hasn't always aided local residents, which I think is true. It has fueled a lot of building. Has it been perfect? No, it hasn't. So yeah, it hasn't always aided all local residents in every single opportunity zone across the country, but there are a lot of success stories, several of them that are pointed out in the article, Andy. I don't know if you want to go through it at all.
I don't know that we need to, but you know what, I guess what anecdote or what section of the article stood out to you? I mean, was there anything that you think would maybe come as a surprise to anyone in our audience, or that even, you know, came as a surprise to you? Can you even be surprised in the world of opportunity zones anymore, Jimmy?
I don't know that I can be surprised. I think the one thing that was surprising to me, and I mentioned this before, was that they did feature Alex Floxbart, a huge opportunity zone champion, at length in this article. And they also got quotes from representatives at Novogradac and at EIG as well, Andy. And they did point to some, they also have a quote in here from Senator Ron Wyden, probably the most vocal and powerful detractor of the program. Not convinced that the dollars are going to the types of places where it needs to go, is what he said in the article. But no, nothing to me was too surprising, other than the fact that I think the article overall was fairly positive, if not a little bit nitpicky about opportunity zones, and wasn't really congruent with what the headline said, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's a fair appraisal. And I guess I'm giving my an unexpected tip of the cap to the New York Times for publishing a pretty balanced article, you know, the headline notwithstanding, and bringing attention to the program. Because I personally think, especially given its bipartisan history, and I think its bipartisan appeal, that ultimately anyone who learns more about OZs are probably on balance more likely to think that they're a good thing versus a bad thing. So I think it's, any kind of press is good press. And speaking of press, and speaking,
well, I do agree, Andy. I'm sorry, I gotta just read like a couple little tidbits from this article, because it's a great article, and I encourage our audience to read it. But I did just want to read a couple of excerpts from it. I know we're probably short on time because we have a ton of stories to cover, but I think this one's important. So I'll read this one paragraph here. Take Huntsville, Alabama, which was experiencing a job boom fed by aerospace engineering and advanced manufacturing. There, opportunity zones, which covered the city's sprawling research park as well as its genteel downtown, intensified a white-hot surge in construction. So that's great. Led to, it pretty much poured fuel on the fire. Already a growing area. Opportunity zones helped take a lot of projects over the finish line, is what I was getting at there. And then it also points out to, opportunity zones aiding in some development. And they even pointed to a couple of examples, specifically in Huntsville, or in Birmingham this time, where they restored a space inside of an old movie theater in a predominantly African-American neighborhood, providing some areas for some apartments and some lesson plan areas for that community. So I thought that was good of them to point out. And now I'm done with that New York Times article, Andy, if you want to move on.
No,
in the show notes for today's episode.
That is fair. And I mean, a bit unexpected for a New York Times reporter to actually dig in, find some of those specific positive examples of the program's implementation. So credit where credit's due, the tip of the cap where the tip of the cap is due. And but speaking of positive press, Jimmy, I want to move on to our next article, our next headline, that we'll link in our show notes. As always, this is from the Western Journal, and it was authored by OZ Insider's members and instructors Shay Hawkins, Jill Homan, and Emily Lavery. Jimmy, tell us about this article penned by some of your best friends in the OZ space.
Yeah, I love this one because it was penned by some of our OZ Insiders members, and all three of these individuals, Shay Hawkins and Jill Homan, have already taught masterclasses at OZ Insiders, and Emily is going to be delivering a masterclass discussion on opportunity zone legislation at our masterclass coming up in a couple months in November. That'll be post-election, where we will digest what's happened with the election, and Emily's going to speak to what she thinks may transpire in 2025 with respect to tax legislation. But this article gave me a little chuckle because it kind of hinted at what we were talking about with that New York Times article, and it points to the New York Times recently publishing that article we just reviewed. And they go on to say the Trump era incentive attracts investment into underserved communities, and the program is key in granting these areas the spotlight they need. The New York Times reluctantly agreed, which I don't know. That was kind of funny to me. I don't think they wanted to agree that opportunities were doing a lot of good work, and the headline doesn't make it seem as though that's what they think. But then you actually read the article, and they do point to several examples where the thing's actually working. So,
Jimmy, I think that line may have been written by Jill. I don't know, just my suspicion. Well, actually, it could have been written
by any of them, but
yeah, who knows?
Yeah, Emily and Shay both previously served on Senator Tim Scott's staff, and Jill is a prominent Republican in in North Carolina. So, none of these people are exactly hide their partisan leaning. They're all three Republicans. And they're great champions of the program, as they should be. And they're all members of my OZ Insiders community to boot. What does this article go on to say, though? It essentially is just kind of a 101 article for this particular audience on what opportunity zones have done. And they call for the extension legislation to be enacted next year. So a good read here for anybody who wants a quick update on opportunity zones and needs a little bit of a primer on, what opportunity zones are, where they've come from, how much money's been raised so far to date. They cite some data here from Novogradac as well, Andy.
Absolutely. Fantastic article. And again, any coverage of the OZ space is good coverage, and especially from our friends from OZ Insiders. Very good article. Jimmy, one of the things I love about this space in 2024, the OZ space, how much data there is.
Yes.
Because I think as a proponent of the program, and as good policy, it is so helpful to just have a ton of data. And so our next story has an eye-popping stat. By the way, I think there's always room for more data. And you have an exciting announcement that's going to give our entire community access to more data soon. But we'll get to that later in the show. Right now, I want to talk about one eye-popping number. Is that fair to say?
I would say it's eye-popping. Sure, yeah.
185,000. Why is that the number of the day on this OZ show?
Well, Novogradac released some of their survey data through Q2 of 2024. And according to their survey, more than 185,000 homes have been built across 214 cities with funding from qualified opportunity zone funds. And I will point out, like I always do, whenever we talk about the Novogradac data, they admit readily that they are only surveying what they estimate as between 1/4 to 1/3 of the total universe of opportunity zone investments. So if you 3x or 4x this number, we're talking about well over 500,000 homes, maybe approaching 700,000 plus homes built with qualified opportunity zone funds, Andy. And for a nation that has a massive shortage, a 7-figure shortage in housing units, according to some estimates, 500,000 plus homes being built in opportunity zones with opportunity zone funds, that should be the headline that the New York Times is leading with, because that's a really impressive number.
Yeah, the NAR, I think you were referring to the NAR stat, which is a housing shortage of 5 million housing units.
Andy, I've heard 5 million. I've heard 6 million. I even heard 7 million recently. But yeah, I think you're right. The NAR estimates it at 5 million.
Well, I opened my calculator app on my computer, because sometimes on the fly I need it even for basic stuff. And at 700,000 units, 700,000 houses is 14% of that 5 million housing shortage, using some of that math, that implied math. If it's 500,000 versus 5 million, or 700,000 versus 7 million, somewhere in that 10% plus range. I mean, that's incredible. That's more than a drop. That's a serious dent in the shortage.
Yeah. And that I think is like the biggest story with opportunity zones, is not, well, they're not doing enough, or, well, we wish we had more data. I mean, you can always point to flaws with the program or flaws with the amount of data we have or don't have. But, the fact that we have this hard figure, 185,000 extrapolated, call it more than 500,000, that's a huge impact that opportunity zones seem to be having all across the country. There's some more data in this report. I won't read the whole thing. But a lot of this coming in affordable housing or below market rate housing, almost $3 billion worth of affordable housing, $2 billion in mixed use, over $1 billion in workforce housing, and then a pretty good number of hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in student housing and senior housing as well. And then they even have this cool top 20 cities table, top 20 cities that have had homes built: Nashville, DC, Phoenix, and Austin, and Cleveland in the top 5. And you can we'll link to this in our show notes. Also, we'll encourage our audience to read more about this, but pretty impressive track record for the amount of funds raised by Opportunity Zones, about $40 billion right now. Again, extrapolate that out to call it 120 or close to $150 billion. And quite a few homes built, Andy, across over 200 American cities.
Yeah, and thank goodness for Novogradac. I mean, the data that they have published in our space. Well, I think I'm an optimist. I'm hopeful. I think the program may get extended, and if and when it does, I think, Novogradac specifically, organizations like Novogradac that publish this data that show in very real quantitative terms, the success of the program, I think are building that political ammunition to hopefully reform and extend the legislation, which, Jimmy, later in the show, I want to get your current prediction on whether that's going to happen, your probability. Doing that month by month now as we go into election season, that's top of mind. But this month we have a whole lot of news, not just covering the election. We have a whole lot of other OZ news. In fact, Jimmy, there was a bunch of news that didn't even make the cut, but we'll try to link to as much news as we can in the show notes. And another resource I want to recommend to all of our listeners, the OZ Outlook by Jill Homan. That's a weekly newsletter with OZ headlines. Jimmy, you and I do this monthly, so it's a little bit more high level, but her newsletter is very granular, very good resource.
If I can just, tout that newsletter for another moment here, that OZ Outlook is tremendous. Jill, thank you for your work in the industry. And Jill every weekend sends an update of all of the Opportunity Zone news that's happened the past weekend. It's usually a roundup of about 3 or 4 different Opportunity Zone news stories you might not find otherwise. If not for, we wouldn't find it a lot of the time if it wasn't for Jill. So Jill, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of good resources in the space, Jimmy, I have to tell you, the last masterclass that you hosted at OZ Insiders was incredible with Crystal. I loved it. I want us to recap that last masterclass, talk about the upcoming masterclasses at OZ Insiders. But first, for anyone in our listenership who's not aware of OZ Insiders, what is OZ Insiders?
Well, Andy, I'm glad you asked, as you always do. OZ Insiders is my mastermind group for high-performing Opportunity Zone professionals and investors. So if you're a fund manager, an accountant, an attorney, or you're an investor who's regularly generating capital gains, or maybe you're an advisor who have a lot of clients that regularly generates capital gains, and you're interested in learning more about Opportunity Zones, you're interested in taking your Opportunity Zone strategy to the next level, you're interested in staying in the know about Opportunity Zones, come join us at OZ Insiders. You can learn more at ozinsiders.com. And I'll show you a calendar of what we have coming up. Our masterclass for next month, the second Monday of every month, is typically when we host these masterclasses. And on Monday, September 9th, Angela Wong of RevGen Consulting will be teaching a masterclass, Direct Marketing Best Practices for Opportunity Zone Funds, which goes hand in hand with the one we did earlier this month with Crystal, Andy, the one you just mentioned, which was raising capital from RIAs and independent broker dealers. These two classes are meant to form a 1-2 punch, and we're kind of at the halftime between these two master classes. But if you were to join at any point during the next week or so here, you can get in on this next masterclass with Angela Wong live Monday, September 9th. We do record all of our master classes. That's why we've got Crystal down here. You can watch the recording. We've got several other recordings of our previous master classes as well, taught by the foremost Opportunity Zone experts from all around the country. The aforementioned Jill Homan taught one on due diligence back in April, and Shay Hawkins, also his name brought up earlier in this episode, he taught a master class on Opportunity Zone legislation updates back in February. So no shortage of great content that we are having guest instructors teach to our audience every month. A little bit farther out on the horizon, we do have Chris Loeffler teaching a masterclass on distressed Opportunity Zone real estate investing strategies. That'll be in October. And then, all these masterclasses, Andy, they're hosted online. They're big Zoom calls. They're a lot of fun to participate in, but we get together in person a few times a year as well. We're going to be hosting our next in-person members only dinner on election night, Tuesday, November 5th, in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We have a private room at Riss Restaurant right around the corner from where the Novogradac conference will be taking place the next morning on Wednesday, November 6th. And then, once again, we already previously mentioned Emily Lavery. She'll be teaching our masterclass election post-mortem and OZ legislation in 2025 in November. So, Andy, that's a little bit about what we have coming up at OZ Insiders over the next several weeks here. Here's our landing page for that private dinner that I mentioned previously.
Jimmy, couple notes. One, just the upcoming schedule with Angela Wong, followed by Chris Loeffler. I mean, we have some really good classes coming up, but I also I already mentioned how much I enjoyed the master class you did with Crystal. Really the last few of them with Jerry and Brett, just getting insights from the instructors in the environment of the mastermind group where it's private. Mm-hmm. I feel a little bit more, that you're having a conversation, you're learning things that the instructor probably might not say in a general wider audience that's going to be broadcast all over the internet or something like that. And so just, getting like a market update on financing, or just learning more about broker dealers and RIAs and, how they think on the record, off the record, et cetera. That to me was they were really enjoyable classes to watch. I learned something too, but they were enjoyable. So Jimmy, thank you for what you do. And thank you, of course, to all the instructors who help us out and teach those classes. Jimmy, before we move off of events, I also wanted to plug you. I know that you have an upcoming speaking engagement in Denver. I don't know if anyone in our audience might be interested in attending, but let's let them know about this family office event that you have coming up in Denver.
Yeah, this is the Family Office Real Estate Institute Conference. Let me just pop it up on the screen right here, Andy. This is the Family Office Real Estate Institute Conference that's put on by my friend and colleague DJ Van Kuren with the Family Office Real Estate Institute, September 17th through 18th on campus at the University of Denver. This is a recent addition, so I have not quite been listed on the speaker page yet. I think I got to send over my bio and my headshot to DJ so he can add to the website, but I'll be presenting on the 18th, I believe. There's DJ right here. Great guy. And he's got a tremendous schedule of events here in Denver at the 4 Institute Conference. This is not Opportunity Zone specific. This is a family office event meant for families to attend and to learn more about investing across a wide range of different asset classes, and really just bouncing ideas off of each other as families or executives of family offices, where everybody's trending, different investment strategies and ideas. And they asked me to speak on Opportunity Zones because Opportunity Zones really are pretty well suited for opportunities for family offices in many cases. So I'm looking forward to that event, Andy, and I'll have a recap of that during our next episode of OZ NewsHour next month.
Yeah.
Oh, here I am. I did get added to the agenda here. 3:50 p.m. Opportunity Zone update and insight. That's me. There we go. This is freshly added.
Jimmy, you're right. It is a good match with Opportunity Zones, the longer 10-year hold period, and the patient capital of family offices. And, I have to say, in my work here with you and Opportunity DB, I've gotten to know a few family offices who are very deep into Opportunity Zone investing, who have fully embraced it. But I have to say they are by far the exception. I get the impression that many family offices barely know that the program exists or know it exists, but haven't looked into it much. So I do think that there's a lot of value to be created there just by spreading awareness of the program and how family offices can leverage it. So thank you for, being a proponent of the program for that audience.
Yeah. And I'll say, if you're a really, really wealthy family, if you're like a Zuckerberg or a Gates or a Bezos, right? I mean, you probably have an army of financial advisors and investment advisors who know all about this stuff and know how to do it. But if you're not quite at that level, if you're a family office, maybe you only have a couple $100 million of net worth, let's say, you may have made that net worth in something totally unrelated to real estate. In fact, chances are the vast majority of families didn't acquire their wealth through real estate, but through other business dealings. And they oftentimes don't have the level of sophistication to place real estate investments. And then you start talking to them about opportunity zones, and that's like a whole nother level. So that's really what the Family Office Real Estate Institute focuses on, is educating families on real estate investment opportunities. And then, opportunity zones, one small but very crucial part of that when it comes to portfolio diversification and tax strategy, Andy.
Awesome. And a great group of people over there at the Family Office Real Estate Institute. I know they have an incredible track record of putting on many great events with, great instructors. DJ's a great guy. So, Jimmy, that's going to be fun. Give us the update after you give that talk, please. And one more tip of the cap before we get to our election predictions and our big announcements. Tip of the cap to Origin Investments, Jimmy. They just announced their bridge financing, a refi for the Rosie. Tell us more about the Rosie. Oh, and full disclosure to our audience, I am a limited partner with Origin's opportunity, one of their opportunity zone funds. Jimmy, I believe you are as well.
Yeah, I am as well, Andy. Good point out. And I like Origin Investments a lot. I really like their principals, Michael Episcope in particular, and have gotten to know him quite well over the years. And yeah, the Rosie multifamily development is located in the Pilsen neighborhood in Chicago. So I believe this is part of their OZ Fund 1. I don't think they had any Chicago holdings in their OZ Fund 2. So this is from a few years back, but they recently secured refinancing of nearly $40 million with a bridge loan from Bridge Debt Strategies, in partnership with Cedar Street Companies, who we know quite well as well, and JLL arranged the financing. So yeah, every once in a while, Andy, we like to point out one of these stories where someone secured refinancing. Always good to see. Just kind of
Jimmy, 95% leased. That I saw that in the
here it is. The Rosie is 95% leased. That's very important.
Yeah, well, it's just a success story, right? When you're building a big prestigious multifamily development like this, and you read, okay, refi announcement, 95% leased. You're just going, all right, tip of the cap to Michael Episcope and the whole team at Origin and Cedar Street, because that, however you want to define it, that is a success story.
Absolutely, Andy.
So, Jimmy, before we get to our big announcement, let us turn now to the election, right? I don't mean to give our audience 24/7 election coverage, because I do think that's annoying in presidential election years. You almost can't get away from it. But let's be honest, Jimmy, the Opportunity Zones program has a ton riding on this presidential election. Like, that, it really does. Maybe not do or die now or never, but certainly very, very important election for the Opportunity Zones program. So we're going to cover it each and every OZ NewsHour episode up until Inauguration Day, and then probably beyond. But we like to start with the betting markets, Jimmy. You prefer the betting markets in terms of their versus like a Nate Silver type model?
Well, I like the betting markets, yeah, because got to put your money where your mouth is. And I don't really like the national polls, Andy, because the national polls don't always really indicate what the electoral college outcome will be. I mean, I think most people think, in fact, there is a betting market on this as well, who will win the popular vote. I think Kamala Harris has like a 75 to 80% chance of winning the popular vote, but who cares about the popular vote? That's not what matters here, right? All that matters is who wins the electoral college. And also, just get on my soapbox for a minute. If the popular vote mattered and the electoral college got done away with, I think you'd see both parties kind of re-strategize everything, right? It would totally change the game. So, I know there's a lot of Democrats who hem and haw over, oh man, this stupid electoral college, why don't we get rid of it? Because then we'd win every election. Well, I don't know that that's true, right, Andy? Because I think the Republicans would change their strategy going forward if that was the case. But anyways, let's move on to the actual task at hand. I digress. Harris is surging, Andy, here lately. And actually, I want to bring up Polymarket's one of the sources for this Real Clear polling average of these different betting markets is Harris with 50 and Trump with 48. just go to Polymarket for a minute, though. I like them. They've got pretty good volume, and I can also see a graph of what's transpired. You can see that
Wow.
Trump's numbers have really moved up and down quite a bit. And I like to point this out. We are 10 weeks from the election. Now, 10 weeks ago, Trump was sitting at 56 cents, 56% roughly chance of winning, according to the betting market here. And he increased all the way up to about 70% right until Joe Biden dropped out of the election. 72% was his peak a little more than a month ago. And then in the time since then, plummeted down into the mid 40s and has since rebounded to right about 50%. So all of that is to say, look what's happened over the last 10 weeks. We have another 10 weeks to go still. So who knows what's going to happen, Andy?
I think I think those are definite words of wisdom. It ain't over till it's over, right? There's still debates scheduled, and I mean, think about the last debates and how much that upended, the campaigns and the election, and also, from what I understand, Vice President Harris hasn't done any major interviews or press conferences with the news media. So I just think that there's, and also, of course, Donald Trump can say anything or do anything crazy at any given time. I think both his fans and detractors would see that point. So I totally agree. Anything can happen. But I have to say it's breathtaking that, the Polymarket and the odds makers have this at virtually a literal coin flip.
Yep.
Right now. And that's pretty, rare. I feel like most elections in my lifetime, even, and at least that I can remember, have been more like 60-40, and
why is this important, Andy? Can you frame why this is important for this show? Like, I think both of us are of the opinion that opportunity zones stand a much better chance of being extended and possibly even reauthorized if the Republicans control the White House and Congress, or at least some combination of that, where its prospects of getting extended and reauthorized might not be so good under a Democratic White House and or Congress. Is that your opinion?
Absolutely. And if I could dig in just a little bit deeper into my thinking behind that, and I wish you would, yeah. I would refer back to even the first story that we covered today, the New York Times, and the headline that they wrote about the program. So the original bill was bipartisan, right? And I think for good reasons, because I think the program has elements within it that would be, appealing to conservatives and that would be appealing to liberals, right? And that a lot of people can get behind. So I think the program originally had that bipartisan appeal, which is why it had bipartisan support, and it passed with bipartisan support and was signed into law by President Trump, right? The issue is, as soon as President Trump signed it into law, politically, I'm not saying in terms of its intellectual history or anything like that, but politically, Trump owns it now, right? And so to the extent that it's been a successful program, if he politically owns it, and he is the public enemy number one,
and he's been touting it at the debate and at the convention in recent weeks as well, Andy.
Exactly. So because he's been touting it, because he's now associated with it, he politically owns it, he takes credit for it, and he's public enemy number one, according to the New York Times, the Washington Post, Democratic Party, left-leaning media. Now it's suddenly a divisive issue, right? Like anything that President Trump is associated with is going to be divisive, right? Like imagine if he came out tomorrow and just said, I'm a huge Yankees fan, I'm obsessed with the Yankees, and was wearing all this Yankees. Suddenly the Yankees would be like, oh no, I don't want to be, suddenly that could be, something that some people don't want to be associated with anymore, just because of the emotional charge that he gives things, to maybe to both sides of the aisle. And so, I would say, Jimmy, even removing that whole aspect, in general, I think tax-friendly policy like opportunity zones would just in general have more support from the political right than the political left anyway. Normally, I understand that, this genesis of this program was bipartisan, but so now,
and it caused me to wonder every once in a while. Andy, you should look at the screen share.
I love it. Yeah,
it caused me every once in a while to wonder how perception of the program would be if it had passed a couple years earlier
under
President Obama, or a few
Yeah.
years later under President Biden, how it would be received. It's an interesting thought exercise, isn't it?
It's interesting, and I'm right there with you, and that right. And so a lot of the opposition to it, I think, is opportunistic politically, right? It's political opportunism, but that's part of politics, right? Politics ain't beanbag. And so the probability, if Vice President Harris is elected president, the probability that she would sign legislation that, even if it reformed, but that renewed one of the centerpieces or one of the main pieces of tax policy that President Trump had claimed as a success story, the probability of that, to me, seems like it would be very, very low, right? And putting even the political implications of that, she hasn't signaled really that she's interested in tax cuts. Anyway, right? So,
well, the way I see it, though, is I think there is a chance, if Vice President Harris were to be elected, if we have a Democratic White House and a Republican-controlled Senate and House of Representatives, there might be some horse trading that takes place. And now, frankly, Andy, this all goes above my pay grade a little bit. I'm not sure exactly how Washington works, but I would imagine that the Democrats have some priorities regarding tax legislation in 2025 that they want to push through. Republicans have a lot of priorities, opportunity zones being one small part of their priorities.
I was going to say, Jimmy, I respect the possibility of horse trading, but I don't think the OZ program will be one of the horses.
I'm just saying, you never know. You never know.
Yeah, but you never know. So it's a possibility, Jimmy, but I would say it's a slim possibility, at least from where I sit. And I'm not a professional analyst, political analyst, but it would seem to be a slim possibility. But never say never. You never know. So what we want to do every month, what we are doing every month, we're giving our personal predictions, probability on the election, and then secondly, personal predictions, probability that the Opportunity Zones program gets reformed and extended before it expires in 2026. So, Jimmy, let's start with the election. Probability Vice President Harris wins versus President Trump.
Well, if you look at the polls, or if you look at the RCP average, if you look at Polymarket, it looks like 50-50. I am going to lean a little bit in President Trump's favor with this, Andy. I think last month, if I recall correctly, I gave him a 65% chance of winning. I'm going to give him a 60% chance of winning right now. And the reason for that 10% bump is I think we're kind of still experiencing a Kamala Harris honeymoon, if you will. The only time she's spoken is in front of a teleprompter at the convention. She hasn't done an interview with reporters. She hasn't done a press conference. She hasn't been in a debate. And I think things might change when that happens. I think once the honeymoon phase wears off a little bit is my prediction. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'll probably be wrong again, but I'm going to give Trump a 60% chance of winning as we sit here right now at the end of August, Andy.
Well, you can't really be wrong. It's a probability. So as long as
That's
you,
true.
as long as you
40% chance of being right if Harris wins, right? So
that, okay. So you are predicting more likely than not, President Trump actually will win this election. Now,
that's my suspicion. Yes.
What percentage odds would you give then of the Opportunity Zones program being reformed and extended before it expires in 2026?
Well, I can't remember what I said last month, but I want to say similar to what I said last month. I'll try to just kind of do this off the cuff right now. I think I would say there's a 65% chance that Opportunity Zones get extended next year. That's what I'm going with.
Wow.
I'm feeling pretty good about it. I don't remember what I said last month. I don't really think much has changed between last month and this month, but right now I'm saying 65% chance that OZs get extended before the end of next year.
Well, that gives me some pep in my step, Jimmy. I love it.
Andy.
I love
to
the
do that for you.
optimism. Where I'm at, I mean, I'm just not going to deviate from the betting markets. I just the wisdom of crowds. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but I think this election does feel like a coin flip to me right now. So I'll go 50-50.
Andy, can I go to the comments for a second here? Because we do have some comments from YouTube. I just want to display a few of them on the screen. We got one here from Chris Worth. Chris, thanks for your comment. Thanks for watching. He asks, are you looking for opportunities on stories of getting started and tracking the developments? Yes, Chris, you know, the industry as a whole really likes these stories. Novogradac collects data on them. We like getting them. So if you have any stories that you'd like to share with us, please do reach out. You can email us at info@opportunitydb.com. And we'd love any story you have. And if it's a good one, maybe we'll feature you on next month's edition of OZ NewsHour. So any comments or thoughts you have, or if you want to just type in another comment, feel free. And then I like this one from Heather. Andy, I think you'll like that one as well. Heather Frazier, who is a member of our OZ Insiders community, she says, these are her words, not mine, Kamala is an idiot, is what she says. So thanks for that thought there, Heather. Appreciate that. Any other comments? Feel free to type them in wherever you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn. I think we had some technical difficulties with Twitter, Andy. I don't know if we got live on Twitter or not.
As far as Kamala goes, I'd wait to see till she does an interview or press conference to judge how I feel about her, but she hasn't done one yet, so we'll see. But I respect the freedom of speech in our chat, so any and all opinions are welcome. As far as my prediction, probability OZ program gets reformed and extended. Jimmy, here's my calculation. See if you can follow this.
Now, first of all, I want to caveat. In college, we called this guy hater because he hates on a lot of stuff. So I think he's going to be more pessimistic than me. Well, what do you got, Andy?
Yeah, what I got is I got 38% because I'm going with 50% chance that Trump wins the election, which is what the betting markets say right now. If he wins, 3/4 chance that it would get reformed and extended under Trump. So that would put it at 37.5. And then I respect the optimist in me. You said, there's a chance there would be some horse trading in a Kamala Harris administration. So I'm going to give that a 0.5% probability that it would happen under a President Harris administration. So the 37.5 goes to 38%. That's my overall
there you go
percent chance. So
I'll take it. Well, we're somewhere between 38 and 65, according to these two guys yakking away on YouTube anyway. So there you go. Take it for what it's worth.
Okay. So moving off the election, thank goodness. I don't want to talk or think about the election every single day, every minute until it happens. Jimmy, we have a big, tremendous, exciting announcement. You gave me a sneak preview today of the survey that you have planned, this massive survey of the Opportunity Zones community. When is this survey being sent out to recipients, respondents?
Andy, it's live right now. We have not published it yet. We haven't sent out any announcement about it yet. This is the first official announcement, but this is our annual Opportunity Zone survey. This one's for 2024, obviously. We do one of these every year where we ask everybody on our email list, everybody who follows us on LinkedIn. We basically push it out everywhere. We want as many responses from Opportunity Zone people as possible. Just a little bit of data about your investment activity and your opinions about Opportunity Zones, because we want to judge or we want to report on how opinions are about Opportunity Zones right now, what investment activity looks like right now, and then also longitudinally kind of how it changes over time. Once we get a few years worth of data, that'll be really interesting to look back on. So I'm actually just going to progress through the survey, just the first few pages of it right now, Andy. By the way, this is like a 4-minute survey. It says I did it earlier today. It took me 2 minutes, so I don't know where the 4 minutes coming from, but let's say it's being generous. It shouldn't take anybody more than 5 minutes to complete, really. It's pretty simple. So who are you? This is an easy one. I'll select I'm an investor. My knowledge level with Opportunity Zones, I'm not quite like an Ashley Tyson, but I'm pretty high. I'm going to give myself a 9. Have you or your organization invested money in Opportunity Zones? Yes. And so on and so forth. It continues to ask you questions about your investment activity in Opportunity Zones. We're going to send this to our email list. I think tomorrow is when we're officially launching this, Andy. But if anybody's watching this episode live, or maybe you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and you're interested in taking the survey and completing the survey, you can head to opportunitydb.com/survey, and that'll pop you onto this survey page. Anybody who does complete the survey, you're going to get an advance copy of the report. So if you take the survey, we're going to send you the report first before we make it publicly available. And we really want to get as many responses as we can. And when you take this survey, you're helping us produce this report, but you're really helping the industry as a whole just know a lot more about opportunity zones, your opinions of opportunity zones, and any hesitations or sticking points you might have about opportunity zones. The whole point of this is to make opportunity zones better. So we're going to report on this on our data to the highest levels of the industry that we can, and it might actually affect some change, Andy.
Absolutely. And I mean, earlier in the show, we were talking about all of the data surveys that Novogradac has produced over the years and how tremendously helpful those have been to the industry. So Jimmy, I appreciate you. I know you put a lot of thought. This is a very thoughtfully designed survey. You didn't just throw this together. You put a lot of thought into it as a resource. The data, the report that you publish can be a resource for the whole industry. So I encourage all of our listeners, please participate in the survey. Even if you've never made an opportunity zone investment, if you were involved or interested in opportunity zones in any way, shape, or form, certainly if you're a financial advisor, family office, industry professional, GP, sponsor, certainly please take the survey. And eventually, of course, it will be public for everyone. And Jimmy, I think that is just about it for the show. But before I let you go, it is time for your pick of the month. What are you reading, watching, or listening to in the world of opportunity zones that you would recommend to our audience?
Andy, it's such a jam-packed month. I'm going to cram in two, right? So this first one comes from IREI, the Institutional Real Estate Inc., their magazine and online website. An article from my friend Peter Saganek at GTIS Partners. With strong gains in the stock market, will opportunity zones make a comeback, is what he and his partner Timothy Bernstein at GTIS Partners write about. This is another pretty basic article on opportunity zones specifically for this audience, but I just like to highlight it because it's an interesting question that Peter poses in the headline. Strong gains in the stock market. Stock markets are hitting new highs. I don't know. I think the Dow and the S&P were both here approaching record highs again today, Andy. I don't know if they hit them or not, but it stands to reason. And I've been talking about this for seems like months, almost years. Hey, with the new stock market highs, why not take some chips off the table and put them into opportunity zones? So Peter talks about that in this article here today on IREI. And then my second pick of the month, Andy, is more of a macro shift, but Federal Chairman Jerome Powell says rate cuts are coming. The time has come for policy to adjust, Powell said in a highly anticipated speech. So it looks like it's pretty much all but official. We are going to get a rate cut in September, barring some sort of huge change or disaster or something like that. I think we're definitely getting a rate cut. The only question is it going to be 25 basis points or 50? Andy, what do you think?
Oh boy, I think she's put me on the spot. I could see either way. I think maybe 25, but certainly more, right? I think the more important thing, whether it's 25 or 50 bips, is that the Fed will keep cutting and they will cut repeatedly. It's a very welcome news for the industry. It gives me a lot of optimism heading into the new year. Still have a pretty active chat before we end the live stream. We just got a question from Roger Mortimer, who's asking if the OZ program is being extended. Roger, you may have just joined the stream after we gave our predictions. I mean, the short answer is we don't know if the OZ program will be extended. I think that probability is 38% it will get extended before 2026. Jimmy believes more likely than not it will be extended.
I think 65% chance, Roger. But I think there's a lot of provisions in the tax code that are expiring in 2025 and in 2026, Roger. So there's going to be some sort of tax legislation that comes into play in 2025 during the next session of Congress after the new session of Congress is seated in January. And I think toward the end of 2025 is when we'll see some tax legislation get passed that will adjust tax rates, renew some programs, approve new programs, and possibly opportunity zones will be involved with that. Fingers crossed that opportunity zones get an extension. Great question, Roger. And then I wanted to field this question from Marilyn as well. She asks about, how can you tell if a community that you live in or that you're interested in investing in is in an opportunity zone? And she points to the fact that she lives in Chester, PA 19013. Maryland and everybody else out there, we have a map of all of the opportunity zone designated census tracts on our website. You can find that map at opportunitydb.com/map. Easy to remember URL. So head on over to our map. It's interactive. You can zoom in, you can search by zip code or city or state, and you can find out if the community that you live in or the specific block that you want to invest in lies within an OZ census tract. And Andy, I'm looking forward to that rate cut as well. I think it's really going to grease the wheels for the real estate market. A lot of transactions have just been kind of locked up in ways that they hadn't been in recent past. And I think it'll make it'll improve the feasibility of a lot of real estate projects if those rates come down. It'll make financing a lot easier. Cost of capital comes down, and suddenly we're back off to the races. So very welcome news indeed. Andy, what's your pick of the month? What are you reading or listening to in the world of opportunity zones?
Yep, good question. So you may remember a couple months back, my pick of the month was Real Estate Trent, or Strip Mall Guy, I think as he's known on Twitter. I've just been taking a deep dive into retail. I think as a sector within commercial real estate, it's overlooked, and I think it has a lot of good things going for it, especially now with this impending interest rate cut. I think it's a sector that investors and GPs should be watching. In some cases, I think they should pay a little bit more attention. And that being said, my pick is Beth Azor and her podcast. She has a series. It's like a mini series. And the title of the mini series is I Own a Shopping Center. Now What? Which I love the name, but it's also it's just great content for very like street smarts, ground level, insights from a very, a rock star leasing agent who just has a lot of a wealth of knowledge in the world of retail real estate on that street level that I love. So I've just been enjoying her podcasts that are all free. Again, her name is Beth Azor. She's very entertaining. That's it for today's show, Jimmy. With that pick of the month, we will be back in a month with our next edition of OZ NewsHour. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening. And Jimmy, thank you for joining me today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Andy. We got college football season starting, so go Irish.
Go Irish.